Hi, Dr. Martin Rutherford, Clinic Director of Power Health here in Reno, author of the book Power Health Back to Basics, and certified functional medicine practitioner. And today we're going to talk about gluten. All right, gluten's kind of a subset of what we're doing relative to talking about functional medicine, basics of functional medicine, kind of a subset to diet, and yet it's kind of its own unique subset. It's kind of a subset or in the same environment as supplements, which we're going to be talking about in the near future, maybe the next segment. And so gluten, when I first got into practice, functional medicine practice. Well, actually, I had a really interesting case years and years ago, and like in the early 1980s, where I had a person who had a car accident. I was treating her for musculoskeletal problems. As I was treating her for this car accident, which was neck pain, migraines, it was low back pain. She kept getting worse and worse and worse. She kept coming back. I'm not quite sure why. And you know, at some point it was like, we're not helping you, and I'm not sure why you're getting worse, because I do this with other people, and the manipulation, the therapies, the types of things that you would treat a person for a car accident, rehab, those types of things. And they said, so I mean, we're missing something here. I have no idea what it is. She disappeared, as she should have, and then showed up 5 months later, and first of all, looked marvelous, lost like 50 pounds. The tenderness was gone from her neck. The tenderness was gone from her back. She was showing up for an adjustment. And as those of you who watch me know, that I'm a chiropractor also. I've practiced chiropractic for quite some time. But at that time, that was my full practice. And she came in for an adjustment and said, well, you know, I just need an adjustment, a tweak in my neck. And I'm standing there like, who are you? Like, I didn't even recognize her. She's like 50 pounds less. And she's asking me for adjustment, same adjustments that used to make her worse. She went to a local alternative doctor here in Reno, and this was 1983. And he told her to get off of wheat. Okay, it was wheat back then. She said, I got off of wheat, and this is what happened. I did not believe her. And I knew the doctor, actually knew him very well. And subsequently had a communication with him, and he explained to me wheat and its sensitivities and the dramatic effects it could have on physiology. And I just kind of like thought he was like, I thought, okay, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't wheat. Okay, well, it was. It turned out that young lady, in retrospect, had a severe gluten sensitivity, and there are a lot of various aspects to gluten. And I'm not going to like do the whole look online and get every single aspect of the gluten protein and discuss it and make it a whole book. But the bottom line is gluten is a huge. It's not just a protein that creates abnormal physiology in our immune system. It also happens to be an excruciatingly trashy carb. So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about gluten in a functional medicine practice. I'm going to talk about gluten in chronic conditions and chronic diseases, which is just my practice. My practice is the great mystery disease practice of, like, I got pain everywhere. It moves here, it moves there, but I've been to 26 doctors, but all my tests are normal. You know, so some of my colleagues call it the mystery disease practice. So gluten's a big part of that. Gluten is potentially a big part of that. And I want to clear up a few things on gluten. Okay, so gluten, without getting into it too heavily, gluten's a protein that's found in wheat. It's naturally occurring. There's a lot of different theories as to why it's becoming a big problem, and you can find them online. I'll just hit a few of them. One of the theories is that we're genetically modifying it so that we can make more wheat and feed the world, okay? And that's a nice thing to do, and it's very altruistic. The way that we can feed the world is because now we can use more of the toxins that we put on there to kill the bugs, and then we're able to make more crops, larger crops, and thus make more wheat. Okay. Problem is the genetically modified wheat. Gluten is what's called a very sticky protein. Okay. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, but the sticky protein is why it's used in everything. It's why it's used in soy sauces. It's why it's used in cake mixes. It's why it's used in pizzas and everything. It sticks things together. Okay. It also, because of that stickiness, it also has a significant propensity to damage the inside of our intestines. And as many of you understand, that the inside of our intestines is where 70% of our immune system. It has a significant, profound effect on our immune system a lot of the time. Gluten also is so it's a sticky protein, and also the chemicals. So it's also theorized, and I think properly so, that the chemicals I'm hearing on the radio now. So this is April 19th, 2019. I'm hearing on the radio right now some of these lawyers who do these national lawsuits where everybody is involved and everybody kind of jumps on board. But it's now being advertised that Monsanto has known that Roundup was a problem since 1981, and so if you've had cancer, if you've had these types of things, then let them know, and you can get in a lawsuit, and they can win it, and you can get $4 out of it, and they'll probably get a lot more. But it's just now that that's starting to come out, and it's been known for quite a while that the toxins very probably are contributing to the gluten issue. So, and there's other things, but those are kind of the two main things. So gluten is found in gluten's found in wheat. It's found in barley, rye, and it is also found in oats. It is not naturally occurring in oats, but still to this day, it seems like oats are being processed in the same facilities and on the same equipment that is processing the wheat and the barley and the rye. And so it seems like oats are pretty consistently across the board a problem. Don't eat, if you're going to listen to me and not eat gluten, okay, then don't eat oats unless it absolutely says these are gluten-free oats on them. I understand that now some people are coming out with those products. So gluten in the clinical perspective, okay, so it's a sticky protein and it has chemicals on it. We eat it, okay. We're talking, so it goes in our mouth, and if you're like most people, you chew your food 3 times, and then it goes, so it doesn't really get, broken down. It's a lot of the testing on gluten is based on the protein in the gluten being broken down, so that there's less mass for things to cling to, and for them to have less effect. So if so chewing would be a nice thing, but most of us don't. And then it gets down to our stomach, and that makes it harder on our stomachs to digest it. So if we haven't chewed it enough, or if we don't have enough hydrochloric acid because we're stressed, or because we have a thyroid problem, or we have bad bacteria in there, these proteins don't get broken down. And this is a third aspect of gluten that a lot of people aren't very aware of, which is when the gluten protein doesn't break down, it becomes much more available for even more toxins to cling to it and create significant cross sensitivities, other food sensitivities that can really, really be confusing to the person. So gluten in this, so those are kind of the mechanisms of the gluten messing you up. When I first started doing functional medicine, I've said it many times, I was definitely in the very first group of functional medicine practitioners years ago, and we thought it were really hot when people would come into us with fibromyalgia, and we'd go, okay, you're going to get off of gluten. And people would argue with us, and they go, it's in everything, and it's gluten, and this is stupid, and it's like why it's stupid? It's like, how could that be causing my fibromyalgia? And on and on and on. I rarely get that anymore, but I got it a lot back then. And then, certain people would not do it. Oh, I'm not going to do your program because I'm not getting off gluten. Okay, well then don't do it. But the ones who did, we had a number who, a percentage, maybe 10, 15%, maybe 20, that actually saw a huge difference just getting off of gluten. That was our diet. It was like, get off of gluten. And then people would get off of gluten, they'd feel so much better. We'd go, look at us. We really know what we're doing. We're like, we're like the smart guys of the world. And that was it. But then we had a lot of people who got off of gluten and they didn't get any better. And they didn't have any changes. And in the beginning, it was confusing. But now that we're starting to understand the mechanisms that occur, we now understand that some people, even though they might have a sensitivity to gluten, or they might have a condition in which they should not be eating gluten, and I'm not sure yet if I'm on the bandwagon of nobody should be eating gluten, but I think I'm inching it more and more towards that. There's other things that will let us know if you should be off of gluten. So in other words, we had people who got off of gluten, there was no change, and then they wanted to get back on it because obviously that was all their favorite foods in the whole world. And then we found out later on that them getting back on gluten was sabotaging a lot of what we were doing because of this abnormal breakdown of proteins. Gluten was even though it wasn't making a huge effect in their physiology per se, it was helping them to develop other food sensitivities, other cross sensitivities to other grains. This is where you look online and go, okay, get off all the grains. And that may be okay, but you may not have to do that if you figure out which aspects of which grains are okay for you and which not. But gluten can cause cross sensitivity to other grains. So we started to realize that if you got off of gluten and you didn't have any change, you either had cross sensitivities to other grains or you had cross sensitivity to other non-grain foods, because gluten has a big factor in leaky gut. Leaky gut is stress hormones. Leaky gut is poor hydrochloric acid in your stomach. Leaky gut is all those things causing poor bacterial dysfunction. Leaky gut is poor ileocecal valve, but leaky gut is heavily, heavily, heavily contributed to and or caused by gluten in a substantial portion of cases. When people come into our office, I just say, just know you're going to be off of gluten. I think I attend 2 or 3 seminars a year from people who are my colleagues, people who are my mentors, people who I respect, people I know who are in the forefront of this, have been for years. They're doing the research. They're doing the research at Harvard. They're in practice. They're taking care of the most difficult patients. And they start off their seminars by saying, just want you to know, I know you just paid $700 to come here and you're sitting in this hotel that you're just paying some ridiculous amount of money for per night to come and hear me talk. And you're going to eat in their expensive restaurants. And I'm just going to tell you right now, don't eat any gluten. And I'm going to tell you this, gluten is the devil. And that's how they started off. And they're like, if you're not going to take all of your patients that come off in your office off of gluten, then a lot of what I'm going to tell you this weekend isn't going to work. That's proven to be the case. Okay. So gluten is it is the most obnoxious, it is the most severe food sensitivity that we know of. Corn is now starting to be called the new gluten. I am seeing evidence of that, but this is about gluten, and right now I think gluten is still out front in being the most challenging food, the most aggressive protein that we put in our body, and it also happens to be a trashy carb. So if you're on 2 or 3, if you've got diabetes type 2 and you're taking 2 or 3 blood sugar medications, but you're eating like pizza and you're eating and you're drinking beer, and you're probably not drinking beer if you're diabetes type 2, but if you think you're doing well with your carbs, but you're still eating gluten, that gluten's going to keep your blood sugar up, more so than a lot of things that you might be more likely to think is going to keep your blood sugar up. Gluten, I brought one thing here. So I'm not having as much trouble with this today, but I did bring one thing in just to say, I have an article in front of me as of April the 10th, 2019, and this is the internet. Okay, like the internet is like still, it's the wild, wild west. Okay, anybody can say anything on there. Anybody can make things sound like they're really great. There's still people on the internet that are going to make their position that you should be eating gluten, that it's ridiculous, that those of us who tell you not to eat it work some sort of whack jobs or something like that. And then you'll find that they have their magic potion to have you be able to eat gluten. I know years ago, Dr. Whitaker, he's got his stuff out there, and I know years ago when the gluten thing became big, I got the big flyer in the mail, and the flyer said, "You don't have to listen to these people who tell you to get off of gluten, because even though you're bad when you get bad after you eat gluten, we have the magic pill that'll help you to eat gluten." Now, we have that magic pill too. In fact, my mentor was the guy who developed the first one. And it's got an enzyme in it that disengages, that breaks down the gluten protein in your gut. So in theory, you're not going to get an effect from gluten if you eat these. Now, I have celiac, okay, and even the hardest of hard rock heads in the medical world go, okay, you have celiac, you should be off of gluten. I take that pill. I'm taking that pill now before I eat, while I eat, and after I eat, because it's just hard to not get gluten into your system, and I'm very, very sensitive to it. But for those of you who don't have that type of definitive, like, I have celiac, so I'm never going to eat gluten again, as long as it's more easy for you to be kind of like swayed by something that says, no, you can eat pizza and pasta and beer and all that kind of stuff, and no problem. Don't do it. Okay, don't do it. These things are meant for accidental exposures. Dr. Whitaker puts this thing out. I'm sure he made like a good chunk of money on it, sending it all over the country. Certain people found out it didn't work, never bought it again. Maybe other people, it did work for them because they didn't have much of a problem. Maybe they didn't need it, who knows. But I would be aware of these products. I have a Gmail in front of me from, of all people, my wife, who thought this was interesting for me to read, mainly because this article cites very, very prominent people such as Deepak Chopra, and it cites a debate between Deepak Chopra and Dr. Perlmutter. If you're not familiar with Dr. Perlmutter, he's written Brain Grain, he's written Wheat Belly, Brain Maker, all about gluten. He's shown up on PBS. He's a very well-known neurologist, mainly because he was brave enough to step outside of his medical model and go, no, these people are right. This gluten is screwing up. I'm a neurologist, and this is why a lot of the people are coming into me. It's causing them brain fog. It's contributing to their migraines and their memory loss and so on and so forth. So okay. So anyway, so these people argue gluten is fine. It's not gluten. It's not the wheat. And they say, if you really want to get to the bottom of the problem, the key is hogberry. That's what the key is. The key is hogberry. And then, on the next page, it's this special offer. I want to send you a special report on how you can gain better natural health. I mention this because this is popular in the gluten world, because everybody wants to eat, gluten, because there's an aspect of the gluten protein that goes into your system and it actually stimulates the same receptor sites in your brain as cocaine, which is why you want to eat it. Okay, it's like you're addicted to it. So that's gluten in general. Gluten in application to your problems. This is probably, I'm getting nothing for this, and I've X'd out the patient's name. Okay, this is probably the best test in the world for finding out if you need to cut gluten out. Most of the gluten tests, the blood tests, are terrible. They are not accurate. There's 25 aspects of the gluten protein that need to be evaluated to determine if you're allergic to gluten. If you have, it's called Cyrex Labs, okay? I get no fiduciary. I have no fiduciary like connection to Cyrex labs. But this is the best test, and I think it's like 80 or 90% accurate, which among testing for food sensitivities is very, very good, except it's not 100% accurate, and that's what I need. But the point I was going to say is there's 25 different aspects of the protein that needs to be tested, and then they test it, and if like this person has just like 4 of them, this person should never eat gluten again, okay? The blood test one of those. So the chances of you getting a blood test and being told that you are okay to eat gluten when you're not okay to eat gluten is substantial, that you would be told you can eat it when you can't. Also, this test brings me to the next point. There are a couple of things at the bottom of this test that test for transglutaminases. Now, I only run this test for 2 reasons. I will run this test if the person is going to be a rockhead and they're going to go, no, well, I'll get off of gluten while you're treating me, but then I'm going to go back on it. So this will give the person some hardcore data going, not doing it. More so, the test will also tell us potentially what it is that the person is, what the gluten is affecting. So there are these things called transglutaminases, and these are enzymes throughout the body, and they basically fold in different ways, and they help you to process proteins properly, and they can affect your immune system if the proteins aren't folded properly, and so. But basically, there are microbial transglutaminases, and if the gluten comes in and it is attacking one of those, it is causing one of those enzymes to develop antibodies to those particular microbial transglutaminases. That will cause autoimmunity. Okay, so gluten can actually cause autoimmunity. There is a very well-known thing called molecular mimicry between the gluten protein, between the proteins on your thyroid. They're actually metabolites on your thyroid and metabolites on something called your cerebellum. Cerebellum, you just got to know, dizziness, vertigo, balance, stiff neck, blurred vision, and overreactive stress responses. That's cerebellum. Okay, so basically, you can eat wheat. It can affect these transglutaminases in these microbial transglutaminases, and then they'll create an immune response. And because you have metabolites on this gluten protein that look exactly like metabolites in your thyroid, that look exactly like metabolites on your cerebellum, all 3 things can be attacked at once. This is very, very well-known and common and expanding understanding of autoimmunity. Okay, and so you eat gluten, and all of a sudden you have gut problems. All of a sudden you have all the thyroid symptoms. All of a sudden you have all the cerebellar issues. You go to the doctor with 26 different symptoms, and they go, yeah, right, you got all these symptoms. All your testing is normal, and so on and so forth. These were the people that we would take gluten away from years and years ago, and all of a sudden everything got better, and they thought it was a miracle, and the doctor thought that the person was a hypochondriac. So there are these transglutaminases. There are tissue transglutaminases. They number them. There's one called tissue transglutaminase 2. If you find that this one, it comes up on you on one of these tests, you have celiac. This is even in the medical model, this is the test that they use to confirm if you have celiac. If you have tissue transglutaminase 3, then it's very possible that you're eating gluten and it may be affecting your skin, your hair follicles. It may be flaring up your eczema. It may be flaring up your psoriasis. It may be causing your atopic dermatitis, your eczema, and those types of things. And then there's a tissue transglutaminase 4. This is the one I run it for most, just for me, because we do functional neurology as well as functional medicine. And we see a lot of neurological problems. In fact, I have a case right now I was working on this morning before I did this. And I'm going to run this test on her. And she has cerebellar neurological issues, symptoms. She has symptoms of. In fact, I'm not going to go into the case too much because she may end up watching this. But but she has neurological findings, okay? This will tell us if those findings are hitting your brain, if it's hitting your nerves, if it's hitting your peripheral nerves, and it'll tell us if this is a component of what's actually causing that neurological finding. I had a dramatic case of this a couple years ago, a couple sisters, and they both had an immune attack on their thyroid and their cerebellum, and we confirmed that by testing. They had been to multiple research hospitals. They had been to some of the most famous hospitals in the country. We took gluten away from them. They weren't able to walk. They would walk one day, their legs would go weak. This is called cerebellar ataxia. Their legs would go weak, and then the next day they wouldn't, and then they would, and then they wouldn't. They had what was called gluten sensitive ataxia. The gluten was actually attacking their cerebellum. Are these things rare? You know, not in our practice. They're not rare. There's varying degrees of how much the gluten can affect you. So you could have significant gluten sensitivity and just have mild dizziness and stuff like that. Or you could have severe gluten sensitivity to the cerebellum and not be able to walk on days when you eat too much gluten. So gluten's mostly known as affecting the gut. So when we talk about gluten, everybody goes, no, I don't have a gluten problem. My gut's fine. So if gluten's affecting your gut, then you probably have celiac. There's a little bit more nuances to that too between older patients and younger patients. But in general, if it's affecting your gut, at the very least, you know, you're having this microbial transglutaminase thing that we talked about before. And 75% of your immune system's in your gut, so it can affect autoimmunity. Or it can directly be causing a problem in your gut. But 70% of the time, the gluten response is not in the gut. 75% of the time, the gluten response is in the brain, on the skin, in the peripheral nerves. So you can get burning in your feet. Now, most of the time people come in here and get burning in the feet. It's usually going to be a component of a small fiber neuropathy, and frequently it's going to be blood sugar. But guess what? It can be autoimmunity, and it can be gluten. And it's actually called gluten-sensitive peripheral neuropathy, small fiber neuropathy. So you can get an attack in your brain. You can get it can be severe to your cerebellum, or it can be brain fog. I just can't think. My memory is going. I can't find my words and stuff like that. It can flare up autoimmunity. So maybe you have autoimmunity, maybe you have chronic asthma or something like that, or the skin issues that we talk about, and you're not connecting it. One day your skin issues flare up, and you go like, well, I'm not stressed, because most people will have psoriasis or eczema or something connected to stress, but I wasn't stressed. How come it blew up? It could be an exposure to gluten, because this transglutaminase shows us that it can affect your skin, your hair, those types of things. So gluten's pretty complex. I mean, I don't have I do have hours and hours to go over it, but I'm not going to go over for hours and hours, because once you have the framework of this, then you can kind of go online, and maybe you can be a little bit more well-armed. In my world, person comes in here, they're not getting off of gluten, we're not treating them. Person comes in here and they tell me they're not getting off of gluten. They'll get off of gluten, but they're going to go back to it because they're not convinced. They're getting this test. Okay. If they have some really mystery neurological diseases, they're getting this test. The test is called Cyrex Array 3. I forget how much it costs. I think it's like $220 or something like that. So for the amount of data that you get out of it, it's actually pretty reasonably price test. But the reality is the vast majority of my patients, it's pretty much, I got off of gluten and I felt better. And that's what I'm getting today. And now people today are coming in here, they're already on the paleo diet, they're already on the ketogenic diet, they're already on the I'm off of white and sugar diet, they're already on some diet. The vast majority of them have tried to get off of gluten, and a lot of them just go, I got off of gluten, felt better. That's all I need to know. I don't need to run an expensive test once they tell me and that they've had a positive response to gluten. So I think that kind of summarizes everything that I really wanted to say to gluten. This is really more the clinical aspect of it. This is really more the legit. I'm not here to argue whether gluten is bad or not. I gave you a little bit of an example of people out there who'll be happy to sell you a product because we think that this gluten thing is a bunch of crap. Let me tell you, it is not a bunch of crap. I've been doing this for a long time. It is a key component. When people come in here and they say, "Well, I can't, I can't do your program because I can't do it. I'm leaving, or I can't afford it, or I don't have time, or whatever it is." Okay, they'll ask me, "Is there anything you can tell me to do?" And the answer is usually no, because there's not much I can tell a person to do without examining him and doing the history. If you've been watching this series, you would know why I say that. But the one thing I can tell them is that I can say, "Listen, get off gluten and see what happens." Some of them are going to get off of gluten and nothing's going to happen. Others are going to get off of gluten, they're going to feel a little bit better, and others are going to get off of gluten and they're going to be that 15% that thinks it's a miracle. You have chronic problems, you have chronic conditions. If they're in the realm of anything I just got done saying, get off the gluten. Don't get off the gluten for 3 days. Get off the gluten for 3 months and see what happens, and eat. And that's the one piece of advice I can give people who just ask for, what is that one thing you could tell everybody? There's for all of those that want to know if we're keeping something back from you. There's one thing I can tell everybody, which is get off the gluten. It's not going to hurt you. It can only help. And like I said, I'm kind of moving towards gluten, like probably isn't a good thing for anybody, but right now for my patient population, it definitely is a non-negotiable dietary change. So that's gluten, and I hope that this is helpful to you. We will be continuing with this series on some more specific and detailed aspects of what functional medicine should look like when you walk into somebody's office. And I will be looking forward to talking to you about whatever our next subject is. I think it might be supplements the next time that I talk to you. So Dr. Martin Rutherford, check us out at powerhealthtalk.com. And if you want any more information on us, then you can find the information there. So I will talk to you next week.